Hi, and welcome to One Cool Thing. I'm Alex Cologne, and I'm here with Sasha Segan. And today we're going to be talking about the iPhone 13 lineup. Now, this year we have four different iPhone 13s. You see Sasha holding up a couple of them right now. We have the iPhone 13 mini, that's the smallest one. We have the standard iPhone 13. Then we move over to the Pro models. We have the iPhone 13 Pro, and we have the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Sasha, you were doing a great job keeping up. So we're going to discuss all four of these. We have reviews of them all up on pcmag.com. We're going to tell you which one is our editor's choice and why. But Sasha, why don't we just start by giving a general overview of these four phones?
Yeah, so the iPhone 13 line are, of course, they are the best, fastest, highest quality iPhones ever. The iPhone lines are never, or I can't think of when they've been a step back, but they are a smaller upgrade on a lot of fronts from the iPhone 12 than the iPhone 12 was from previous generations. I have in my hand right now the standard iPhone 13, and I have down here an iPhone 12 to compare it to. And you can see that they are pretty much exactly the same size. But the iPhone 13, that's this one, has a slightly smaller notch on top. And the camera lenses are arranged differently. The camera lenses on the 13 are diagonally arranged. On the 12, they are vertically arranged. So
Now, as far as those cameras go, is the camera bump out any different, or that's the same size?
it's a little bit bumpier. So it
Mhm.
bumps out a little bit more. And you can't actually use iPhone 12 cases on the 13. And that's because of both the camera bump and slightly different positioning of the side buttons. But yeah, so what you get with the 13 is you get a somewhat faster processor, slightly faster processor. You get a somewhat brighter screen. You get the new cinematic mode, which is basically like a dynamic portrait mode for videos. You get somewhat better low light photo performance. Just a lot of small improvements, but then the one big improvement is battery life. And that's really what my reviews of all of these iPhones ended up focusing on, because where Apple didn't use much more powerful components this year, it used much more efficient components. And that's resulted in jumps of 2, even 3 hours of screen on time with the various size models.
Yeah, it's interesting because battery life is really not necessarily one of those specs that, when a new phone is released, everyone is oohing and ahhing over. And it's not one of the things that's getting the most attention. But when we were doing these reviews, it really is what it comes down to. Like the difference between buying an iPhone 12 and an iPhone 13, the biggest difference is that you're going to get hours more battery life.
Yeah, and I really learned a lot from our readers last year when here's the iPhone 13 mini. And I really highly recommended the iPhone 12 mini because look at how easily this thing fits in your hand. Look at how easily you can do everything one-handed with this phone. The size really seduced me.
Now, we,
And then
we should just pause and note here, you are a small phone enthusiast. You've been, singing their praises really forever.
Absolutely. So the iPhone 12 mini was to some extent, that was really a dream come true for me. And then I heard from our readers, the battery life is unacceptable to them, that they were having massive battery anxiety around the 12 mini. And the fact that it was small and premium and functioned as well as the 12, all of that paled before their battery anxiety. And so the fact that the 13 series have significantly better battery life all the way across the line, and this 13 Pro Max that I have here has 18 hours of screen on time in our test, I think that is going to be a big advantage over the previous line.
Now, I do think it is important that we should call out one, I guess you would say negative that this additional battery life brings to the table, and that's the fact that all these phones weigh more than the previous models.
They do. They do. They are a little bit heavier, and the 13 Pro Max is a real slab. Like this is a big heavy phone. But as I was using the 13 Pro Max specifically, I was really getting into it as the kind of mobile photo and video studio that it's intended to be. Because as with the 12 line, um, when you go from the 13 to the 13 Pro or the Pro Max, you get your third camera lens. You get, in this case, both the Pro and the Pro Max have 3x optical zoom camera lenses to the 12 Pro's 2 and the 12 Pro Max's 2.5. So you get a better zoom camera lens. You get even better low light performance. And this year you get macro photography, which I am not personally into, but once again, listening to the readers, a lot of people really love that. And it gives them kind of a new perspective on their world to be able to take photos of things very, very close up.
Yeah, macro photography, it lets you, capture a bead of water that's on a flower outside.
Yeah, or capture or take photos of insects
Right.
or just very fine details in things. But the big size and the battery life on the Pro Max, the size makes it a good device for actually editing your photos and videos. In a lot of the different third-party editing programs that are on the iOS platform, and then the battery life, especially when you're recording video, and now the Pro models now support this ProRes video codec, which is really only used by professionals, but it is heavily used by professionals. It takes a lot of battery life. It takes a lot of processing power. And so the big battery in the Pro Max just gives you room to shoot video without worrying that you will run down quickly in the way that, say, the 13 mini will.
Now, you spoke about processing power. There is a difference in power between the standard 13 series and the Pro series, right?
Yeah, and that has to do with the new screens. And now this effect is absolutely not going to show up on this recorded zoom because the recorded zoom is too low frame rate. But let's see what I have. Oh, here I've got a web page. And so now this Pro has a 120 hertz screen. It's actually variable frame rate. When it's still, it's only refreshing at up to 10 hertz. But when you're scrolling, especially in a first-party Apple app, it goes up to 120 hertz. The regular 13 and the 13 mini have more standard 60 hertz screens. And now, so yeah, you can't see it on the Zoom. But the 120 hertz screens, after you've been using them for a while, they feel more natural. It's the kind of thing that you don't miss until you've been experiencing it for a while. And then
It's just
once
a
you,
more like fluid motion, right?
it's more fluid, it's more restful on the eyes. After looking at it for a while, the regular 60 hertz screens feel jittery when you're scrolling through things. And to support that 120 hertz screen, the Apple added a fifth GPU core to the Pro models. And that gave it in our tests more than 30% better GPU performance. And that primarily goes to making the screen more responsive.
It is interesting to note, though, that as far as like playing a game, for instance, or using any other app, really the performance is about the same from phone to phone.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing about iPhones. Apple's SDKs are so well optimized to provide good performance on recent devices that whether you're running an iPhone 11, iPhone 12, iPhone 13, all your third-party apps are probably going to run really, really well. It's really only when you get to the 4 or 5-year-old phones that things start to feel gummy or slow. So there is this additional performance, but in the case of these phones, I feel like you really only see it in that one feature, the 120 hertz screen.
Yeah, so ultimately, when we're talking about the iPhone 13 series, you really don't need to consider power all that much in your buying decision. It pretty much comes down to battery life, what kind of camera you want to have, and something that we haven't spoken about yet, price.
Yeah, so there's a whole lineup of phones out there right now. Apple has something at pretty much every price point, from $400 up to $1,100. They have the iPhone SE, which I don't have here, and that's $399. And then they are still selling an iPhone 11, which is now $499. They've got they have the iPhone 12 and 12 mini still on the market for $599 and $699. Then in your 13s, your mini is $699, your regular is $799, then your Pro goes to $999, and the big one is $1099. So you've got all of these steps up. And now among that crowd, I would say I'm not so enthusiastic about still buying an 11 or for that matter, a 12 right now. I think that the additional battery life you get on the 13 series is really worth that $100 bump over the 12. And the 11 lacks 5G. And of course, you know I'm into 5G. I think 5G is the future.
5G is coming, 5G is now, 5G is big, 5G is scary, 5G is going to change everything.
If you're going to have your phone for 3 or 4 years, even if you don't have 5G now, then it'll provide a advantage a year from now.
And so what about the iPhone SE? You didn't mention that one. Do you recommend anyone buy that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want a simple, low-cost iPhone, it's really the way to go. And it doesn't have 5G, but I think down at $400 for an iPhone, that is something we are willing to give up for that price. And also the SE, it just has that lovely little iPhone 8 size, and it has what a lot of people want, the Touch ID sensor. Of course, all of these newer iPhones rely on Face ID, and Face ID, while convenient, is still a little bit controversial. And there's a lot of people who, especially if they're wearing masks a lot of the time, they still want that fingerprint sensor. And if you want the fingerprint sensor, you got to go with the iPhone SE.
Yeah, it's so true. I am an iPhone user in my daily life. And for the last year and a half, it has been just such a slog outside. Because you try to trigger it with your face because you keep forgetting about it. And then you realize, oh, wait, I have to now wait for the PIN code to come up and do that. Not the biggest problem in the world, of course, but it is something that is easily solved by Touch ID.
Yeah, and Apple has had several software updates to try to enable Face ID working with masks. And of course, there's a workaround where you enter an alternate face with your mask on, and then that gets recognized through Face ID. But it's not the beautiful, pleasurable, it just works Apple experience. It is a bit of a kludge.
Right. Okay, so now that we've discussed all of the various iPhones in comparison to one another, let's talk about just the iPhone 13 series specifically. Which one do we recommend the most and why?
So this year, we are recommending the standard iPhone 13, which is now telling me that something is using my location in the background, iOS 15 privacy and security there. So it's the standard iPhone 13, and that is really about the balance of price, power, and battery life. Once more, last year, I heavily recommended the Mini. Readers said, we want better battery life. The standard 13 size really does give you that better battery life. It gives you confidence that you can use it for a full day. And it's got all of the general power of the 13 line at a reasonable price of $799. Second place for me is the really big one. And now you say, why the big Pro Max as opposed to the slightly more affordable 13 Pro? And once again, it's about battery life. It's about the incredible 2-day battery life on the Pro Max, and that giving you the freedom to shoot and take hours worth of videos in your day if you feel like it, and not worry about having to run out or having to recharge. And so once more, I think that's worth the $100 bump over the smaller model.
Right. And so there you have it. We do have full reviews of each of these different iPhones on PCMag.com. But just to reiterate, the iPhone 13, that's our editor's choice. We gave it 4.5 stars. The iPhone 13 Pro Max, that one also got 4.5 stars, but not our editor's choice. However, if you are a pro, if you're a content creator, this is the phone for you. Slightly lower rated, but still great phones. There's the iPhone 13 Pro and the iPhone 13 mini. Wow, I can't believe I got that correct and that you were holding up the right phones. So again, if you want more information on any of these, including in-depth benchmarks and charts and photos, they're all online at PCMag.com. Thanks for tuning in to One Cool Thing, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.